This is Land of Havilah, 2 Chronicles 34. King Ammon died of assassination at the age of 24. Idolatry has been the law of the land for 57 years, and now Josiah is on the throne. Verse 1. Josiah was 8 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 31 years in Jerusalem. He did that which was right in Yahweh's eyes, and walked in the ways of David his father, and didn't turn away to the right hand or to the left. For in the 8th year of his reign, while he was yet young, he began to seek after the God of David his father, and in the 12th year he began to purge Judah and Jerusalem from the high places, the Asherah poles, the engraved images, and the molten images. Comment: He took the throne at age 8, began to seek God at age 16, and began to purge Judah and Jerusalem of paganism at age 20. David, his father, in verse 3, is actually his 14th great-grandfather. Josiah's 17th of 21 kings of the house of David is approximately 640 B.C. We can assume Josiah was only a figurehead at the age of 8, with someone else wielding the real power. Since he placed his faith in Yahweh at age 16, we might speculate that the priests and Levites mentored him, as they did 7-year-old King Joash many generations before, 2 Chronicles 24:2. Levites were educators, 2 Chronicles 17:8. In verse 3, at age 20, Josiah began to purge Judah and Jerusalem, and verse 4. They broke down the altars of the Baals in his presence, and he cut down the incense altars that were on high above them. He broke the Asherah poles, the engraved images, and the molten images in pieces, made dust of them, and scattered it on the graves of those who had sacrificed to them. He burned the bones of the priests on their altars, and purged Judah and Jerusalem. He did this in the cities of Manasseh, Ephraim, and Simeon, even to Naphtali, around in their ruins. He broke down the altars and beat the Asherah poles and the engraved images into powder, and cut down all the incense altars throughout all the land of Israel, then returned to Jerusalem. Comment: verses 3 to 7, Josiah purged every pagan object he could find in Judah and to the far north of the now-defunct northern kingdom. He went out personally, according to verse 4 and 2 Kings 23:16. The Assyrians conquered the northern kingdom 3 or 4 generations ago, 2 Kings 18:10, and it's in ruins, as the passage we just read says, but it's obvious the Assyrians aren't keeping very tight control of the area, or Josiah wouldn't be able to go there and do what he's doing. There's more detail about Josiah's purge in 2 Kings 23. Eventually, he did a thorough job. He started with the temple, purging from there the objects of Baal, Asherah, and the gods of the sky. He removed the horses and chariots of the sun god from the courtyard. He burned all these outside the city and transported the ashes away. He removed the ritual male prostitutes who had set up shop in the courtyard and the shops of the women there who made tapestries to Asherah. He outed all the priests in Judah who had participated in paganism and didn't allow them to serve at the temple. He went to the valley of Hinnom and cleansed it, where his grandfather Manasseh had sacrificed some of his aunts and uncles to the god Molech by fire, 2 Chronicles 33:6. He cleansed the pagan objects from the Mount of Olives that had been there ever since Solomon put them there. At least they had been there off and on. On his tour of the northern kingdom, he killed the pagan priests and burned their bodies on their altars. He started purging at age 20, as verse 3 said, but when he was 26 coming up, he learned something that intensified his resolve. Verse 8. Now in the 18th year of his reign, when he had purged the land and the house, he sent Shaphan the son of Azaliah, and Maaseiah the governor of the city, and Joah the son of Joahaz the recorder, to repair Yahweh his God's house. They came to Hilkiah the high priest, and delivered the money that was brought into God's house, which the Levites, the keepers of the threshold, had gathered from the hands of Manasseh, Ephraim, of all the remnant of Israel, of all Judah and Benjamin, and of the inhabitants of Jerusalem. They delivered it into the hands of the workmen who had the oversight of Yahweh's house, and the workmen who labored in Yahweh's house to give it to mend and repair the house. They gave it to the carpenters and to the builders to buy cut stone and timber for couplings, and to make beams for the houses which the kings of Judah had destroyed. The men did the work faithfully. Their overseers were Jahath and Obadiah, the Levites of the sons of Merari, and Zechariah and Meshullam of the sons of the Kohathites, to give direction, and others of the Levites who were all skillful with musical instruments, as they were over the bearers of burdens and directed all who did the work in every kind of service. Of the Levites there were scribes, officials, and gatekeepers. Comment, in verse 9 there was, quote, a remnant of Israel, end quote, meaning a remnant of Israelites living in the former northern kingdom. This will be confirmed in a few verses. Somehow they and their forebears avoided the Assyrian deportation, which is just interesting to know. In verses 8 and 9, Josiah collected money from Judah and Israel and delivered it to Hilkiah the high priest for temple repairs, because in verse 11 the previous kings had destroyed the temple, as translated here, also translated that they let it fall into disrepair. 2 Kings 22 is more detailed that during the repairs they installed new stones and timbers, so the damage was structural and not just cosmetic. The temple was between 300 and 400 years old, so age was a factor, plus neglect or outright malice. Coming up, when Josiah's men brought the money to the high priest for temple repair, the high priest said, "By the way, look what I found." Verse 14. When they brought out the money that was brought into Yahweh's house, Hilkiah the priest found the book of Yahweh's law given by Moses. Hilkiah answered Shaphan the scribe, "I found the book of the law in Yahweh's house." So Hilkiah delivered the book to Shaphan. Shaphan carried the book to the king, and moreover brought back word to the king, saying, "All that was committed to your servants they are doing. They've emptied out the money that was found in Yahweh's house and have delivered it into the hand of the overseers and into the hand of the workmen." Shaphan the scribe told the king, saying, "Hilkiah the priest has delivered me a book." Comment, it's still approximately Josiah's 18th year on the throne, as verse 8 said, meaning he's 26 years old, and he's just finding out about Yahweh's law given by Moses, which is what Hilkiah called it in verse 14. It's been collecting dust somewhere. Verse 18. Shaphan read from it to the king. When the king had heard the words of the law, he tore his clothes. Comment, how is it that Josiah didn't know about the law of Moses? It's pretty obvious that the previous two kings banned it. Quote, Manasseh shed innocent blood very much, 2 Kings 21:16. So we might assume it was a death sentence during the previous two administrations to be even found with a copy of the law. Most of the copies have been destroyed, and the one Shaphan read to Josiah might be the only one left. In verse 19, Josiah was so distressed about the law that Judah didn't know it and wasn't following it that he tore his clothes. And verse 20. The king commanded Hilkiah, Ahikam the son of Shaphan, Abdon the son of Micah, Shaphan the scribe, and Asaiah the king's servant, saying, "Go inquire of Yahweh for me and for those who are left in Israel and in Judah concerning the words of the book that is found. For great is Yahweh's wrath that is poured out on us, because our fathers have not kept Yahweh's word to do according to all that is written in this book." Comment, Yahweh warned in the law that he would destroy Israel for not keeping it, but this goes beyond not keeping it, that they literally didn't even keep the book of it, except for one hidden copy. In verse 21, Josiah sent his men to inquire about it, meaning to ask a prophet about it, to get a now word from Yahweh on where Judah stood and what they should do. Verse 22. So Hilkiah and they whom the king had commanded went to Huldah the prophetess, the wife of Shallum the son of Tokath, the son of Hasrah, keeper of the wardrobe. Now she lived in Jerusalem in the second quarter, and they spoke to her to that effect. Comment, this is the only appearance of the prophetess Huldah, except for in the parallel passage of 2 Kings 22. She's the wife of the keeper of the wardrobe, which is probably the royal wardrobe. Verse 23. She said to them, "Yahweh, the God of Israel, says, tell the man who sent you to me," comment, in other words, tell Josiah, verse 24. Yahweh says, "Behold, I will bring evil on this place and on its inhabitants, even all the curses that are written in the book which they've read before the king of Judah, because they've forsaken me and have burned incense to other gods, that they might provoke me to anger with all the works of their hands. Therefore my wrath is poured out on this place, and it will not be quenched." Comment, Huldah says Yahweh's wrath is coming and won't be quenched. So why can't Yahweh's wrath be quenched, since Josiah has been so faithful? Jeremiah's ministry started 5 years ago, which was Josiah's 13th year, Jeremiah 1:1. Yahweh explained to Jeremiah that Judah returned to him in pretense, Jeremiah 3:10. In other words, it was only something Josiah forced on them. They had no change of heart. Josiah alone couldn't quench Yahweh's anger because he was angry with Judah in general. But coming up, Yahweh will make sure Josiah doesn't get caught up in the consequences, Huldah says, verse 26. But to the king of Judah who sent you to inquire of Yahweh, you shall tell him this. Yahweh, the God of Israel, says, about the words which you've heard, because your heart was tender and you humbled yourself before God, when you heard his words against this place and against its inhabitants, and have humbled yourself before me, and have torn your clothes and wept before me, I've also heard you, says Yahweh. Behold, I will gather you to your fathers, and you'll be gathered to your grave in peace. Your eyes won't see all the evil that I will bring on this place and on its inhabitants. They brought back word to the king. Comment, even though Josiah knows Yahweh's wrath can't be quenched, verse 29. Then the king sent and gathered together all the elders of Judah and Jerusalem. The king went up to Yahweh's house with all the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the priests, the Levites, and all the people, both great and small, and he read in their hearing all the words of the book of the covenant that was found in Yahweh's house. Comment, Josiah called an assembly of great and small, meaning everyone regardless of status, and read the law to them. Coming up after the reading, he stood in his place, which was by the pillar on the porch, 2 Kings 11:4, the same place where they traditionally anointed the kings, verse 31. The king stood in his place and made a covenant before Yahweh to walk after Yahweh and to keep his commandments and his testimonies and his statutes with all his heart and with all his soul, to perform the words of the covenant that were written in this book. Comment, Josiah committed himself to the law, standing by the pillar. Coming up, he ordered Judah to take a stand, but as Yahweh told Jeremiah, it would only be a pretense. Verse 32. He caused all who were found in Jerusalem and Benjamin to stand. The inhabitants of Jerusalem did according to the covenant of God, the God of their fathers. Comment, after learning about the law, Josiah continued his purge with even more resolve. We know from the sequence of events in 2 Kings 22 and 23. Verse 33. Josiah took away all the abominations out of all the countries that belonged to the children of Israel, and made all who were found in Israel to serve, even to serve Yahweh their God. All his days they didn't depart from following Yahweh, the God of their fathers. Comment in verse 33, Josiah continued his purge into all the countries that belonged to the children of Israel, also translated all the lands and areas belonging to the Israelites. We know that included Judah and the former northern kingdom and maybe other nearby nations that Josiah dominated, if there were any. 2 Chronicles 35 is next.